It's a barbiturate. The usual ones are seconal or pentobarbital. They can be emptied into an ounce glass of liquid. And then it's the individual who has to ingest that drink. They have to be able to do it completely on their own. The universal setting has been usually in a person's home and the person's in their bedroom. Family, sometimes friends are gathered. It's not necessarily a particularly mournful situation. In certain people, there is a great sense of empowerment in their ability to do this.
You may have a right to control your own life, but what about the right to control how it ends? The aid in dying or physician-assisted suicide debate is playing out in a place you might not expect, Montana. This is Big Sky country, vast and sparsely populated, with local politics dominated by conservative Republicans. But it's also the third state to legalize physician-assisted suicide. It just doesn't fit the crunchy granola stereotypes of the other two, Washington and Oregon.
There is a long tradition here going back to frontier days of people basically saying that there are certain areas the government ought to stay out of.
Mark Connell was a lead attorney on the landmark assisted suicide case, Baxter versus Montana.
Lawyers like me typically handle fairly routine cases on a regular basis. And this was a case that had great societal importance and great personal importance.
At the center of the case was this man, Robert Baxter, a former U.S. Marine and long-haul trucker who fell ill to lymphocytic leukemia. As he grew sicker and weaker, Baxter decided he wanted to hasten the end of his life. But no doctor would prescribe him the medication he needed to do so he turned to Connell.
Bob approached us and asked if there was anything we could do from a legal standpoint to try to gain access to medications that, if he chose to use them, would allow him to hasten his death. He knew he was going to die. The only question was how long that was going to take and how much suffering he was going to go through. When
Connell won his case before a district judge, he called Baxter to share the good news.
And his wife answered the phone, and I told her what had happened, and she said, well, Bob would be delighted that he was asleep right then, was not available to come to the phone. And the irony is he never woke up. Bob died without ever learning he had just won that case.
The Baxter case went all the way to Montana's Supreme Court and finally established the legality of assisted suicide throughout the entire state. But that was just the beginning of this fight.
All of our utopian novels, Brave New World, 1984, Agenda 21, government-assisted suicide, or offingly non-productive, is all a theme in the background.
State Representative Creighton Kearns wrote House Bill 505, designed to outlaw assisted suicide once and for all. When it comes to assisted suicide, Kearns has two big concerns: big government and God.
Our lives do in fact belong to God. He will call us when it's time and not before. It's the way I live my life and the way I would encourage other people to live theirs.
Do you think it's appropriate for religion to be injected into politics?
Without a doubt, because we cannot separate the two.
I just don't think there should be any role for government in telling somebody what to do between the privacy of them and their doctor and their family and their healthcare providers at the end of life like this.
Missoula doctor Eric Kress runs a family practice. He never wanted to be at the center of this controversy, but one day a certain patient changed everything.
He was a man who is now 120 pounds of skin and bone. He used to be over 6'2". He was a very strong, physical, athletic man. He made his desire and intentions very well known to me that he wanted this medication. But it was new. I wasn't really all that familiar with it. He became very angry with me, and he dressed me down. He yelled at me. He also called me a coward. And he made me think about this situation. And what happened is I didn't write him the prescription, and then within a month or two he had stockpiled enough medication and he ingested a large amount and ended up killing himself. And I had to kind of ask myself, why didn't I do it? I can do this. Am I worried about me, or am I going to worry about him?
Since then, Dr. Kress has become an outspoken advocate.
The bill clearly states that any doctor, nurse, or family member who assists a patient in obtaining an aid in dying prescription will be sentenced to 10 years in prison and fined $50,000. So you may be wondering, what kind of doctor is it that you will be sending to jail? I stand before you today and state that I am that kind of doctor. I have written an aid in dying prescription on 3 occasions. Rather than shirk and hide from it, I want to be honest with people and society and tell them what I've done. And to be honest, I'm proud of what I've done. I urge you to vote against House Bill 505, a bill that would be the government taking of a personal freedom that the citizens of Montana now enjoy.
10 years in prison for prescribing someone a medication that they ask for. You think
That's a maximum. That's a maximum. It won't. I can't imagine it occurring. With the full implementation of Obamacare, government is going to provide all your health care. The minute you become a non-productive citizen, you're out of here. There are always ways outside of the government's assisted suicide. Is it any more or less traumatic one way or the other? I don't know.
There certainly are other ways to hasten your own death. People living in places where aid in dying remains illegal sometimes take matters into their own hands.
I think the reason that I don't fear death is that I see it as a natural process. I think most people are fearful of dying in pain.
This is E.T. Rulison, a 97-year-old retired California doctor. His lifelong love of science and the natural world informs his outlook on life and death.
That was rattling around in the claw of a dinosaur 160 million years ago. That gives me a perspective to life that's helpful.
Rulison is a free spirit who lives in his own home with his wife and his books. And that's how he plans to die, whether the state likes it or not.
When I closed my office 30, 40 years ago, 1976, I had leftover narcotics that I didn't want to destroy and have tucked them away, and I have a supply for myself that I will be able to use if it ever comes to the point where I need it. This has given me the ability not to fear death from a painful death. And that, for me, has made it very comfortable to think about dying in that constructive way.
But not everyone is a retired doctor with medical knowledge and access to powerful narcotics. Some people just want to die as peacefully and painlessly as possible. And that's where Dr. Kress says the physician plays an important role.
Suicide is someone taking their own life, and they want to take their own life. With aid in dying, this is people that would rather live, they'd rather be healthy, they'd rather live, but they have a terminal disease, they've been dealt a card in life, it's a tough one, and they are going to die. It's a question of how are they going to die, and we are aiding them in the dying process. We do have a tradition in the U.S. that the government really doesn't get in the way of the doctor and the patient in their decision making what's right for them, especially governing what a doctor and a patient would even talk about. We're supposed to have free speech, and you're telling me what I can or can't talk to a patient about? That is crazy. This is not good for America, for Montana, or patients and doctors.
23 senators having voted aye and 27 senators having voted no, House Bill 505 has not passed second reading. Senator Whittick.
Madam Chair, I would move to indefinitely postpone House Bill 505.
If I have any final words to say, it would be to the California legislature. I hope you will seriously consider legislation that will provide death with dignity as a possibility for anybody who chooses.